Hello, everyone. You've dropped into what might just be the most exciting 30 minutes of your Tuesday. Here on this series, we cover the world of security, data wrangling, and detection engineering. And today, specifically, all of that within your Microsoft security tech stack. We're going to be showing to you and proving to you just how, with Anvilogic in the mix, your Sentinel can get this glow up to maximize the value of the investment within the organization. For those of you that are catching the replay, hi, we're so glad that you're here. So if you've landed here because you are interested in modernizing your threat detection strategy across your Sentinel, across the log analytics, really the core engine behind it, or today, Alec will be telling us all about Data Explorer and Fabric, if you're on that already, all without the pain of starting over. So if you've landed here because of that, it's definitely going to be worth your time. So with me today, I'm honored to be joined with Alec Costner. He's one of our finest SEs here at Anvilogic. So Alec, thank you for being here and hooking up these folks with an Anvilogic for Sentinel demo.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Now, as far as to break the ice a little bit and kick us off with a little bit of an icebreaker, we're going to throw up a poll in the chat to get a feel for what is so hard about working with security data wrangling today. What makes you look like Walton Goggin when you're up against either the cost side of things? It seems like the better you want to get with threat detection, the more it costs. Or when you're tuning a very rigid, rule pack, it gets pretty tough and it makes you kind of look like that. So interested in the chat, what is making you look like this today? Now, The White Lotus season 3 had some pretty messy characters, but overall, I'm kind of happy with how the ending went. I'm seeing a lot of log ingestion complexity come in and rule management and sprawl for sure. I find Sentinel is pretty good with ingestion. I mean, it's such a great investment for making sense out of E5 data. If you've got that, super, super great value for that. But over time, I find that you may be starting to ask some questions like what log should I be deciding in between? Why is rule maintenance, kind of stealing all my time? Why do all my alerts kind of sound like figure it out yourself? Things like that. This is the kind of things that we hear, or if any of this is familiar, it seems like we're in the right place. All right. Let's show the poll results. So log ingestion complexity, difficulty in correlating non-Microsoft data, and rule management sprawl. So all positioned nicely to talk about the kind of things that we're going to talk about today. So for those of you that have not heard of us before, I'll give you a little 3-second primer on Anvilogic. We're a Series C startup that is, not to be confused, we're pretty mature into the game, especially with enterprise customers who, like us, we also believe that detection engineering is the true and most critical function of security operations. But yet, as it stands today, it's a very slow and manual and cumbersome process to realize, right? And it's slowed down by primarily fragmented data, right, and tooling, non-Microsoft sources. And it was never designed to scale with you. And so what we're all on about is providing an alternative approach, right, to this promise of SIM and not with a rip and replace of any kind, right? So what that means is an AI-assisted platform that plugs in, enhances what you already have across Sentinel, Log Analytics, Azure, even Fabric, and it helps you move at the speed that the SOC needs to move at, right? That's made for a constantly changing dynamic. So as far as who built this, who's the team behind this approach? Why did they think that they needed to rethink this whole approach? We've got the former JPMC SOC, which I would say one of the largest and most well-resourced security operations centers in the world. They've managed hundreds of global infrastructure and budgets, and yet still found themselves constantly fighting to stay ahead of threats, constantly fighting against incidents that kept creeping in. And I mean, I would argue that experience it really highlighted and exposed a lot of the the limitations of traditional SIM models, the centralized, the rigidness of it all. And they essentially built a platform, right? The platform that they would have wanted, the one that's designed from the ground up to scale and understand what it is that you need and be very equipped to change it as it goes. So this platform is not designed to, oh, sorry, this platform is designed not to force you in between these trade-off decisions between coverage and control. So when you live this kind of pain at scale, right, you're uniquely equipped to solve it. And I really do stand by that. So Alec, I want to hear in your words. I feel like I've done enough ranting. Let's talk about this for a moment, the why, right? The moment that we're in, what has changed in the market that has made our integration that we went live with in way back in October 2nd, right? Why this integration with the modern Microsoft tech stack, why it's so relevant right now, but it's also super, super essential.
Yeah, because a lot of companies have moved to the Microsoft ecosystem, specifically with the E5 license,
Yeah.
and they want to leverage that investment, right? With traditional SIMs, that's against that, right? You'd be essentially having to move those logs outside of the Microsoft ecosystem into those traditional SIMs, therefore dealing with those typical ingest costs and things like that. And a lot of times, especially now, companies have so much data, right?
Oh
The
man.
data from everything, especially getting into AI, right? As everyone adopts more AI, that produces more data, and more data into traditional SIMs results in more price increases, right? And it forces companies to actually have to pick and choose what they bring into their SIM, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of organizations that just can't afford to bring in their network data or some cloud data into their SIMs because it's just too expensive, right? So they end up with this dark data or this siloed data, right? So what we've seen is being able to just keep your data where it is, leverage that existing investment with Microsoft, right? You don't have to have that problem, right? With Anvilogic sitting on top of the Microsoft stack, right? You can continue your investment into Log Analytics, Azure Data Explorer, and Microsoft Fabric.
And you're getting into the how. And of course, that's the what exactly does this mean to our customers? Let's talk about what three things we're able to provide. I think you were hitting on them a little bit.
Yep. So we're looking for customers to leverage their solution in a more cost-effective way, right? So
Mhm.
you see Azure Data Explorer on here. We see a lot of customers looking to migrate data outside of Log Analytics into Azure Data Explorer,
Yeah.
and then leveraging Anvilogic, we can correlate across the two, which ties into the ability to create those new detections as code very quickly, right? As you integrate new sources, we can deploy detections in the matter of minutes, and therefore reducing those detection gaps that you typically have when you're leaving things in Log Analytics and Microsoft Sentinel, especially for those, I'll say, third-party sources, right? Those non-Microsoft sources that Sentinel typically doesn't play too nice with, right? That's
Right.
really where we see a lot of value in shifting that data into a more cost-effective solution like Azure Data Explorer, and then leveraging the Anvilogic Armory, deploying a lot of detections against those log sources.
And I know we wanted to stick with three, but what's really important to point out is that it doesn't require a ripping and replacing of Sentinel. Like you can keep using Sentinel today, deploy more of what we've got, right? But also leverage even more data that maybe is too expensive to put into Sentinel or Log Analytics, right? Running behind it into Data Explorer, for example. And it's been super, super cost effective. So let's talk about the how, the architecture of it all, right? We talk about decoupling logic from the analytics engine. What exactly does that mean for us?
Yep. That means you keep your data where it is, right? So if it's in
Right.
Log Analytics today, it's in Azure Data Explorer today, it's in Microsoft Fabric today, right? Anvilogic will bake into all of those. So everything that you create, everything that you manage within the Anvilogic platform gets deployed down into your existing Azure infrastructure. So Anvilogic will spin up an ADX cluster, Azure Data Explorer cluster, and using that, it will deploy its rules, it will query into, and ultimately everything will reside within your Azure environment. So all the rules are running within Azure, again, whether it's running within Sentinel, Azure Data Explorer, or Log Analytics, right? Again, it's all relying on your existing infrastructure, your existing investment, right? You're not having to rip things out or migrate data somewhere else.
And also I love that we can import, because then it becomes, if you add another tool into the mix, right? It's not just now having to manage two different platforms. You can import that all of the rule coverage and bring in that visibility of what's already running with Sentinel right today into Anvilogic, and you can see, from a very centralized detection view, all of your coverage up against MITRE, which I'm really excited to show in the demo.
Yep.
So I think that probably gets us right to the demo. Before we dive in there, uh, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of the outline of what we're going to show? Are we going to see what we're going to see in terms of the coverage, in terms of how it plugs right into Sentinel, and how we can merge that with beyond right Sentinel in the tech stack, how we can measure the coverage, how we can even keep the rules that we are actively deploying much more healthier. Or maybe
Yep.
I just covered the outline.
Yeah, you covered a lot of the outline. So we're gonna jump right into what we call a threat scenario, which is going to be a correlated detection.
Mhm.
And what's key with these correlated detections is they have the ability to correlate across your source stack. Right. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and jump right into it. So as we jump into this threat scenario, these are broken up into different stages. In this example scenario, we have three different stages: initial access, persistence, and command and control, right? And what's very important about these scenarios is it's based off of point in time detections that will live within your Azure environment. And
Mhm.
within your Azure environment, you could have a detection in log analytics, right? So typically, we look at these first detections in here. They're Azure based, Office 365 based, right? Those Microsoft native sources. Typically, they're probably going to remain in log analytics from kind of just a cost standpoint. They're really not too heavy there, right? But then when we get into the stage three here, and we're looking at proxy and firewall traffic, those detections are probably going to live in Azure Data Explorer, or that's a recommendation we typically would make, is to actually shift those out of log analytics, because again, those are third-party sources, and put them into a more cost-effective solution like ADX, right? And leveraging these threat scenarios, we can correlate that data together. Again, it can live in log analytics, it can live in ADX, it could live in both, and we're
Mhm.
tying them together in this correlated scenario. So walking through this, right? So we're going to start out looking for things in initial access. This could be suspicious logins via Azure. It could be brute force attempts, right? You'll see four specific individual rules selected in here. And then there's an or statement looking at phishing. So stage one is saying, hey, a user account was compromised with a brute force attempt, or we saw some suspicious signing activity, such as like impossible travel or something like that, or a user got phished. And this phishing is based off the MITRE attack tag phishing, meaning you have the ability to select tags within your detections. So all of the rules that we have and all detections that you bring into our armory will get tagged with the MITRE attack framework. That gives you the ability to leverage those tags when you're building out these correlated scenarios. So in this situation, I just pointed to the phishing tag and it grabbed 33 rules that we have in our library specific for phishing. So stage one, account was compromised with brute force or suspicious sign-in, or there was a phishing attack on the account. And that leads us into stage two. So all the stages in this scenario would need to be satisfied to trigger an alert, right? Everything is a point in time detection that we're tying together around a central entity to build out this correlated detection. So getting into stage two, there's going to be a followed by here. So initial access followed by persistence. In this case, it's a 40-minute time frame, right? So we're going to wait up to 40 minutes to allow stage two to be satisfied. And everything you see in the scenario is completely customizable, from the individual rules that are selected to the tags that are selected to the time frame that's selected, right? So in this case, we have 40 minutes, right? Maybe you want to make that 40 seconds or 20 seconds or 2 hours or 2 days, right? You can modify everything in the out of the box scenarios. So getting into the persistence side of things, right? So accounts compromised, right? What happened next, right? They got a phishing email. Did they click the link? Did they download something bad? What happened after that, right? We're trying to tell that story with starting with stage two. So looking at persistence, again, we're still focused around the Microsoft ecosystem side of sources. So again, looking at Azure Office 365 based logs. In this case, we're looking at Azure consent grants or a user getting added to a group or role within Azure to determine persistence, right? So attacker got in, they want to maintain access into the network, right? So doing something to hopefully maintain that access. And that's what we're looking for with this stage two persistence. Next, we're going to get into stage three. Again, this is looking at those typically third-party based sources. And again, it doesn't have to be. And I'll show here editing this scenario to add a stage four here in a minute. But within stage three, now we're looking at command and control type traffic, right? So attacker got in, compromised the account, performed some persistence. Now they're looking to establish some CNC. How are they doing that, or how are we looking to detect that in this scenario? We're specifically looking for Tor activity or some suspicious base proxy connections. And again, these will typically be detections that will likely live in Azure Data Explorer. But again, they don't have to, right? If you're fully invested in log analytics, all of this can work straight in log analytics, but it could also be a mix of log analytics, Azure Data Explorer, as well as Microsoft Fabric.
I
So
love
getting, go ahead.
I just wanted to say two things. I love that the threat scenarios are mapping these atomic indicators not only across the domains, like across all the platforms you just mentioned, but also across what can be these vendor alerts, like phishing. We have a lot of phishing alerts that can be generated by like Microsoft for email, or maybe like a proof point if you have a proof point layered on top of it too. That's merging security vendor alerts as well, in addition to raw event queries, right?
Yep. Yep. That's a really good call out. So when we take a look at this specific phishing tag in here, it'll be a mix, right? And of course you can customize this, but it will be a mix between those traditional vendor-based alerts, like you mentioned, Proofpoint, abnormal security, Mimecast,
Wow.
right? Appliances that are detecting phishing that you're typically alerting on, we're looking to correlate those, right? But because we're tagging things with phishing, it gives you the ability to also layer in your more telemetry-based detections, where instead of maybe looking for that phishing alert, you're looking for maybe like a suspicious Windows executable, like someone downloaded an attachment, they downloaded a Word doc, and that executed PowerShell, right? So that kind of telemetry-based detection is also leveraging this phishing tag. So when you reference that tag, it's pulling in those vendor alerts and also those telemetry detections and saying, hey, we need to see any of these. Just one of them needs to fire to satisfy stage one.
Yeah, and the chaining of it too. It's you're encompassing so many different, a much better story rather than every single PowerShell sign on, which is so voluminous in nature. It's so noisy, and you don't need to be notified every time that happens. But once it happens like that, it all of a sudden becomes a much better alert that I would want to spend my time on.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. From the analyst side, this provides a lot of value because this is going to reduce a lot of the noise and the false positives that they see. So instead of, like you mentioned, getting alerted every time there's a PowerShell sign in, which
Yeah.
probably happens a lot, right? They're now going to get alerted when there's that sign in, followed by persistence, followed by command and control. But then when they actually get that alert, it's going to provide a lot more context to them because again, they're not getting that point in time alert and having to figure, okay, like what happened before this, what happened after. They're getting that alert and it's telling them, hey, this is what we saw before, this is what we saw after, right? So they're getting the full chain of alerts from initial access to persistence to command and control.
Absolutely. Keep going.
And the next piece I wanted to show is just how easy it is to modify these, right? So if I wanted to, let's say, add a stage four and focus around exfiltration, right? So attacker compromises an account with phishing or initial access. They perform some persistence, perform some command and control, right? What do they do next? In this case, let's say I want to look for exfiltration. So I'm going to go ahead and add a stage four in here. Of course, you could modify the stage names. You could modify the group names. I'll leave it alone for this example. I'm just going to change the group name to exfil. And then I'll click in here to add in the exfil rules. So there's different ways to search for the rules you have within your environment. You can search off the MITRE tag, kill chain phases, categories, and other options in here from a searching perspective. The most common way is going to be MITRE ATT&CK, again, because all
Of
of the
course.
rules you're going to have will be tagged back to MITRE ATT&CK. So you can drill into specific tactics, techniques, sub-techniques. In the case of exfiltration, I'm just going to search exfil, select the exfiltration category, and we can see we have 61 rules within our environment for exfiltration. So from here, I can add all the rules, but maybe I want to search for some specific rules and just include those, right? I can search in here. If I want to just search exfil again, that'll pull up all the rules that have exfil in the name. I can also include certain rules, but in my example, I just want to grab every rule I have for exfiltration and add it to this scenario. So just like that, we're going to have a stage four looking at exfiltration, grabbing 34 specific rules. And now I can customize this time frame if I wanted to. It's set to 60 seconds, right? Maybe this is like a low and slow attack, and let's do 2 days, right? So I'll update this to 2 days, meaning the attacker gets in, compromises an account, within 40 minutes needs to perform some phishing activity, within 2 hours does some command and control, And lastly, we're waiting up to 2 days to see exfiltration, right? So we're giving them a lot of time to perform their actions to ensure we're catching this attack.
I love that. And especially the and or conditions. Like I that the what is I think that's called Boolean logic. It encompasses so many different combinations.
Yep. Yep. There's a lot of powerful tools that you have when you're building out these scenarios from a grouping perspective, from a correlation perspective, right? And also from a detection engineering perspective, right? Because you don't have to worry about building a point in time detection that's going to blow up your analyst team and cause a lot of noise, right? You can
Mhm.
think of those detections, it almost shifts your mindset into a hunting perspective, right? Instead of thinking if I build this detection, it's going to alert my analyst team. Think of that as like an automated hunt, right? You're building this, it's running, generating
Yeah,
results, and then these scenarios are sitting on top of that, correlating those results together to produce a very high fidelity alert.
absolutely. Alec, at the beginning of the call during the poll, I saw a lot of responses for rule management and sprawl. And in the research for this webinar, I went all over Reddit to find, well, what is so difficult about working with Microsoft Sentinel detections? And the comments I saw is like, rule maintenance is stealing all my time. My alerts are always like, figure it out yourself. It's really hard to understand and come to a root cause of what actually is broken. And they're spending their time tuning and over tuning this rule. And then all of that time is like, you're kind of vulnerable. So, can you tell us a little bit about how we can help with that, specifically within Sentinel alerts?
Yep, absolutely. So that will lead us into something called AI insights, right? So we have three different types of AI insights: tuning, hunting, and health. For
Mm-hmm.
this example, I'm going to focus more on tuning because these insights are all around essentially tuning out the noise, tuning out the false positives that customers typically see within their environment, right? Because you're
Yeah.
building these detections and these detections are producing a lot of signals. So these are looking at, I'll call it the alert lake, or we call it the event of interest, right? Those signals produced from all those point in time detections. And what these tuning insights are attempting to do is identify patterns of what's causing the noise, right? So we're going to recommend these tuning insights to you, and you have the ability to review the findings. In this case, we're going to call out specifically what we found. What's the process that's causing the problem? What's the rule it's causing the problem for? What's the impact of this problem, right? In this
Mm-hmm.
case, it triggered about 10,000 times in the past 7 days. Our tuning recommendation will cut out about 99% of those total events, right? So if you implement this tuning, you're going to drop your noise down to about 1% of the noise you've been seeing, right? And okay, you get these tuning recommendations, right? I have to go in, you review them, you accept them, they get deployed out, but you don't have to manually review these, right? You have the ability to automate your tuning. And this goes into the automation of the rule deployments as well, is you can automatically accept what we call the tuning insights, right? So instead of having to review those tuning recommendations as they come in, right, you can automatically deploy them out, right? So that reduces the need to manually maintain your rules, manually tune the rules, right? Leveraging AI and ML, we're able to look at that alert lake and see what's causing the problems and recommend tuning those out. Whether you want to automatically do it, depending on how comfortable you are with the automatic processes, right? Automatically tune them out, or you want to review them, right? And it's not like you're going to have hundreds of tuning recommendations a day. Typically, customers will come in, they'll integrate everything, and they'll probably deploy hundreds of rules within the matter of minutes. And they're going to be getting a lot more tuning recommendations initially than they would a week, 2 weeks, a few months from now, right? When things are in a better state.
I love that. It's alert quality that improves with these are traditional machine learning models, new AI learning models. Very soon we'll have agentic AI agents running and keeping the health and status of data feeds. That I'm super excited to share to showcase more in our future webinars. Um, for the health and the tuning, I think that this is something that we really want to call out on the health, the data feed health, because your rule is only as good as obviously the health of the data feed that feeds it. So what kind of things are we constantly doing to maintain the health of that data feed?
Yeah, good question. It's a multifold approach with the health insights, right? So the first thing that we want to look for is customer deploys a rule and they mess up the syntax, right? So the rule's never going to work because that's important. You think you deployed a very high fidelity detection
Yeah.
and you don't know that you actually didn't write it right. So it'll actually never fire, right? So we'll detect things like that from a syntax perspective. And then we're also monitoring feeds, right? So we're not ingesting your data. We sync up within Azure, so we'll be able to see all the tables you let us see, and we
Mhm.
know the data volume and everything like that as it relates to those tables, right? So pick a source, let's say Windows, for example, right? We're able to determine, okay, what's the expected volume of that based off of what we've seen? Is it trending down? Is it trending up? Is it gone silent, right? So if you have like a silent source, another thing, you think you're covered, but the source has gone offline and you have no idea, right? So that the AI health insights are also designed to look at the feeds and the tables within your Azure environment to understand, should there be data coming in? Okay, we don't see data, right? Let's generate an alert from the health perspective.
Mhm. I love that. Also, detection coverage. That's the last thing I have in my notes here. Uh, I saw so much Reddit traction on how manual it is reporting detection coverage. It's super tedious AF, and that's one of the most important things to do, especially when communicating your impact, up the chain. And from our latest state of detection engineering report, it's one of the things that people want to work on the most in 2025, but it's actually was reported as the activity they enjoy doing the least is trying to, you know, track not only reporting but visualization of what you're doing, of your team is doing. Can you show us what that looks like in our platform?
Yep, yep. So everything in our platform, like I mentioned, is tagged back to MITRE, and that allows us to produce a visualization of how your detections stack up to the MITRE attack framework.
Hmm.
And that leads us into what we call the maturity score. And that's a combination of visibility within your environment, right? The feeds you have connected. And I get this question a lot of like, can you recommend feeds for me, right? Yes, we can, right? Right here, we see four added missing feeds, right? Based off of the priorities that you have set up in the platform, meaning what do you care about from a business perspective? What's your threat landscape look like? What are your sources, right? Based off of
Mhm.
that, we can determine you should add these feeds. You should have these feeds within your environment to improve your visibility, which layers back into the detections against those feeds and against the MITRE attack framework. Right. But then, okay, how do I improve this? Right. You're here now. How can I make my detections better? How can I improve my visibility gaps? Right. How can I increase my MITRE score? You can layer on the recommendations that we have on top of the MITRE attack framework, right? These
Mhm.
recommendations, again, are coming from those same priorities that you have set up in the platform. So if we're recommending something to you, we know that you have the feed for it, you care about this, you should deploy
Mhm.
these rules out. So if we look at account manipulation, for example, we can see you currently have 32 rules deployed, but we have six additional rules or sub techniques recommended that tie back to 38 additional rules, right? So if you wanted to deploy those out, you could automatically deploy them out. You, of course, could review those recommendations and choose to deploy a few out, right? But we're able to layer on top of these recommendations to show you how you can improve. Not only how can you measure, but how can you improve this, right? Because that's important. You want to improve your security posture over time, and the recommendations is how you do that.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's communicating your impact in a language that our executives understand that proves that detection engineering is delivering real business value because it is. It definitely is. We've got 80% of enterprises that took our survey. They're investing in it and it's being recognized at the board level. And I feel like the dashboard that we show even in a 2 weeks time during most of our pilots, like our maturity score is insane. Yeah, exactly. This is the one I'm talking about. Well, going back, you can look back, from a year ago. What's the coverage increase across your team, and then the productivity against that uh, as well.
Yep. Yep. We typically see customers come in and they'll start with a very low maturity score. And as soon as they integrate, we'll deploy hundreds of detections and it's going to spike, right? And then we
Yeah.
try to focus on that gradual increase over time, all tying back to, what does your visibility look like? What is your detections against that visibility, right? To increase this score over time. And just, you can sleep better at night knowing I'm covered, right? I have the feeds to see what I need to see, detections to put against those feeds, all tied back to your maturity score, all tied back to MITRE. So it's very easy to report up on how is the team doing, how are we improving over time.
And it's data driven because that day one you guys plug in during your pilots, that gives you a baseline already of what your current coverage is based on your priorities. And it's a very, very eye-opening experience because you have that delta you can keep working your way up towards, right? With all these net new recommendations, net new things that you can keep adding over time. And we're adding new detections on a weekly basis, right, Alex?
Yep. Yep. So we have a dedicated Forge team that's adding detections on a weekly basis. They also produce articles called the trending topics, which will cover specific topics tied to specific industries.
Hmm.
Sometimes it'll be a global industry, sometimes it'll be specific ones, right? But within this is specific to a specific threat, right? A specific APT group, what's going on in the wild, could be multiple APT groups, right? But within these articles, we have detection packs. And these detection packs will compose of those point in time rules we call threat identifiers, as well as those correlated detections we call scenarios. So you can identify, are you covered for this? How are you covered? How can you improve the coverage? And then if you want these, you could just deploy them all down straight into Azure.
And it's completely guided and fully operational because I think that's also a big thing that's so different than the rest of other vendors that have threat detection libraries because honestly everybody does, but what makes this so different is that we have such like complete context of what makes the most sense for you. It's so much so to give you like you're partially covered here because you have these data feeds in place, so you can get it operationalized super quickly and super guided.
Yep. Yep, 100%. And that's a huge part of our platform are the recommendations. And those recommendations, again, are all tied back to what you care about from a business perspective, from a threat landscape perspective, and what you have, right? So, you're never going to get a recommendation and you're not going to be able to use it. If we're recommending you something, you care about it and you have what you need to leverage it.
Hmm. I love it. We're filling holes or we're making things better. You're getting more value out of what you already own, what's already active, the data. Like imagine it just creating more and more and more rules out of plugging a data feed in once like that. It does. I don't think it gets better than that.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah, all great stuff you showed here. Is I think that concludes your demo. Is there any last thing that we missed? I know there's maybe to pick on the elephant in the room. We've got a co-pilot. Microsoft went to the market with first, I think, before anybody with a co-pilot. Do you want to show why our co-pilot, what it does, how it can better integrate and even maybe even play with the Microsoft co-pilot?
Yeah, yeah. So to be specific to our co-pilot, right? It's think of a co-pilot, but with a security analyst mindset, right? So
Mm.
it's trained on specific security models, so it knows security, right? So you can ask it security-based questions and you'll get security-based answers, right? In the other aspect, it's going to know the Anvilogic platform. It's going to know your sources. It's going to know your schema, right? So as you're working on whether it's normalizing data, right? It can automatically normalize data for you. It's going to help
Mhm.
you with investigations, right? You have the ability to pass in alerts into the Copilot, right? So it can perform those, I'll say, level one type triage steps to you. And then it can help you speed up your investigation, right? When you're doing your searches, you can automatically throw in a question of, hey, what's this user agent? It'll tell you what the user agent is. Is it suspicious? And it can look things up on VirusTotal for you, right? So think of essentially an LLM or an AI model specifically trained to help you from a security analyst, as detection engineer perspective.
Yeah, and if you guys are interested in hearing a little bit more about Copilot and how it works, we don't follow the same licensing model of Microsoft Copilot. It's more of a question based this type of thing, not compute based. So if you are keen on that, we'd be happy to talk more. But I think that is a wrap. We're a little bit over time. I'm going to close off with some final things. Alec, that was a fantastic demo. Thank you so much for walking us through that. I think that was real proof behind the demo, but also we've got a real proof with organizations that we've been able to do this time and time again with an Anvilogic deployment sitting right on top of Sentinel and Log Analytics and even Data Explorer and Fabric. We're very used to working with even the most complex of environments and providing this decoupled approach to get more and to realize more and more detection engineering outcomes out of what you have while keeping your data there. That is what we've uncovered. We invite you to go to our landing page or anvilogic.com/sentinel landing page. We have a lot more information about those case studies with some of these logos. To leave you behind with some content, some assets, we also host a podcast on a bi-weekly basis. Then we have one coming up on Thursday to talk about the UEBA illusion. So you can register and tune in on Spotify and meet us, come hang out with us to keep our nerdy conversations going. I highlighted a couple times throughout the webinar our report. A lot of data was revealed from 250 detection engineers that we surveyed and captured a true state in the market of this time, which is significant and a true pivotal moment that we're seeing, which is super cool to be a part of. And finally, we want to thank you for spending some time with us to learn about our offering with Microsoft Sentinel. And if you are going to RSA, we do invite you to stop by our booth. We're celebrating in the best way, a couple different activities and also events that we're partnering with some pretty big players in the space. We also have a party on Monday night that everybody is welcome to. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And Alec, thank you so much for such a killer demo.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.